Leading the news this Thursday, Robert Gates denied he slanted intelligence reports. Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton entered the presidential race. South African writer Nadine Gordimer won the Nobel Prize for Literature. We'll have the details in our news summary in a moment. Judy Woodruff's in Washington tonight. Judy?
On the NewsHour tonight, our main focus is again the confirmation drama on Capitol Hill over President Bush's choice to run the CIA, Robert Gates. We'll have extended excerpts of Gates' testimony and exchange with the senators. Then we'll talk with two senators on the committee, Dennis DeConcini and John Chafee. Finally, some words from Nobel Prize-winning writer Nadine Gordimer.
Funding for the NewsHour has been provided by AT&T. AT&T has supported the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour since 1983 because quality information and quality communications is our idea of a good connection. AT&T, the right choice. And by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And by the financial support of viewers like you.
Robert Gates answers his critics today. The CIA director nominee said accusations that he slanted intelligence reports to conform with his own political thinking were ridiculous. He was responding to 2 days of testimony from former and present CIA employees. Gates said he had searched in vain for evidence of political influence at the agency. He said he and other CIA officials did everything they could to avoid the problem.
No manager could or can afford to forget the possibility of politicization because the perceptions themselves can affect morale and analytical courage. And so we worked hard at emphasizing integrity, investigating rumors, and reassuring analysts that they were right to be sensitive to the issue. Repeatedly, we told them, tell it like it is. Don't sugarcoat the pill.
Gates said that during his tenure as deputy CIA director in the mid-1980s, some at the agency may have resented him because he'd been appointed to change what he described as flabby, complacent thinking. We'll have extended excerpts and analysis of the Gates testimony after the news summary. The Senate today began 4 days of debate on the nomination of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. The nomination was sent to the floor by an evenly divided Judiciary Committee with no recommendation on whether it should be approved. Here's a sample of today's floor debate.
Judge Thomas's answers on the abortion issues are beyond belief. As a respected attorney and policymaker, I cannot fathom that he has no position or no preconceived leanings on this important issue.
Haven't we had enough judges who are trying to impose some preconceived idea of their own on the American people? And don't we really want judges who will decide cases on the basis of the facts and on the basis of the law without trying to fob off on the American people some personal philosophical point of view?
The Senate is scheduled to vote on the Thomas nomination next Tuesday. Judy?
The Organization of American States is sending a high-level delegation to Haiti to demand that military coup leaders surrender and allow the elected government to return to power. The OAS also urged member countries to cut diplomatic and economic ties with the island nation until democracy is restored. Haiti's deposed president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, made the rounds on Capitol Hill today to brief Congress about the situation. Afterward, he spoke with reporters.
With the international community, with the support of international community, there is no doubt we will be able to save democracy in Haiti against this small group of soldiers with one general trying to kill democracy in Haiti.
U.S. officials hailed the action by the OAS as the most decisive and prompt in the 43-year history of that organization. At the same time, U.S. forces are on standby to evacuate all but the most essential of the 8,000 Americans living on the island. I talked this afternoon with Assistant Secretary of State Bernard Aronson, who will represent the U.S. on the OAS mission. I asked him to describe the current situation in Haiti.
It's very chaotic. There is some scattered shooting. The military has power nominally, but the power is still divided, and the Senate and the Chamber of Deputies have tried to meet. They didn't have quorums, so it's a fairly chaotic situation.
Well, when you say the power is divided, what do you mean? It's not this General Cedras?
Well, General Cedras has said he wants to turn over power to the Parliament. It's not clear what that means, and it's not clear how serious he is either.
Are you concerned at this point about the safety of the, 8,000 or so Americans living in Haiti?
We're watching that very closely. Obviously, that's a very important concern of ours, and I think we're in a position, if necessary, to act quickly to protect American lives.
Do you have a reason right now to believe they're in immediate danger?
Well, obviously, if we thought they were in immediate danger, we would be acting to evacuate them, but Haiti is in a very chaotic situation. It's not clear who is in control, if anyone, and there are a lot of soldiers with weapons and very itchy trigger fingers, so it's a dangerous situation.
You're going down there in the morning with a delegation from the Organization of American States. What is the message you're carrying? First of all, do you know that General Cedras is going to receive you?
The Secretary General and his representative in Haiti have been seeking to contact General Cedras and others in Haiti to let them know that the delegation intends to go tomorrow morning. I'm not sure whether they've made all the arrangements yet. I'm going over there later on today.
You mean to the OAS?
Yes.
Assuming you do go, what message do you carry to him?
Well, the OAS last night adopted one of the toughest, if not the toughest, statements in its history. And the message, to put it simply, was the democracies of this hemisphere will not accept the violent overthrow of democratically elected government in Haiti. And more than words, the democracy said they are cutting all commercial, financial, and trade relations with Haiti. They're going to stop any weapons shipments to Haiti. They're going to isolate Haiti diplomatically. And if those measures are not successful, then they're going to reconvene quickly to consider additional steps.
So you're really asking him to give up power immediately or right away, is that right?
That's the message from the OAS, yes.
And if he doesn't, you say the OAS has said it will reconvene to do what?
Well, that remains to be seen. I hope that it won't be necessary. I hope that General Cedras and others in Haiti will realize that Haiti is totally isolated. Haiti is cut off from any possible economic or military support. They cannot maintain power, and that for the good of his country and to maintain peace, he needs to find a formula quickly to restore the legitimate government there.
United Nations inspectors made their first helicopter searches inside Iraq today. The inspectors arrived in Baghdad yesterday after a long dispute between Iraq and the UN over the use of helicopters. The team will be looking for Iraqi Scud missiles, which must be destroyed under the Gulf War ceasefire agreement.
India's Supreme Court today ordered a criminal trial in the 1984 Union Carbide Bhopal plant disaster. It also upheld a $470 million civil settlement. More than 3,800 people died after a deadly cloud of gas escaped from the plant in the central Indian city of Bhopal. Today's court decision reversed an earlier ruling giving Connecticut-based Union Carbide immunity from criminal prosecution in the disaster. Back in this country, the Commerce Department reported that orders to factories dropped in August. The 1.9% decline was the steepest in 5 months. That followed a 6% rise in July.
Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton declared his candidacy for the Democratic presidential nomination today. He made the announcement at the old State House in Little Rock to about 3,000 supporters. Clinton accused President Bush of turning his back on the middle class and pledged to address domestic issues he claimed the Republican administration has ignored. The 45-year-old governor is the 6th candidate to enter the presidential race. The House of Representatives tonight passed legislation to close a special bank used exclusively by House members. The measure was introduced by House Speaker Tom Foley. The move came after a recent disclosure that members had written more than 8,000 checks with insufficient funds to cover them and had paid no penalties. Foley acknowledged that he had written one such check, but said he was unaware at the time that the bank had held it rather than letting it bounce. He also said the House Ethics Committee would investigate members who were guilty of what he called significant, substantial, and repeated abuses of the bank.
My standard in all of this is that no member of Congress should enjoy any privilege in banking operations or check cashing activities which is not available to any other citizen, no better and no worse. As a matter of fact, these accounts were not insured. They did not involve taxpayers or appropriated money. They involved the money of individual members. And so there was no loss to the taxpayers, even in those cases where there was a delayed check.
Yesterday it was revealed that some 300 current and former House members had more than $300,000 in unpaid bills at restaurants operated by the House of Representatives.
South African novelist Nadine Gordimer has won the 1991 Nobel Prize for Literature. The Royal Swedish Academy made the announcement in Stockholm early today. Ms. Gordimer has written 10 novels and more than 200 short stories, most with a strongly anti-apartheid theme. She told reporters in New York, where she is lecturing, that she hoped the prize would aid efforts to bring racial justice to her country.
I'm hoping that this kind of publicity, it passes from the individual to the country. And since I have sort of two roles in my life, one as a writer and another one, my commitment to the cause of freedom in South Africa, and also my commitment to creating a new post-apartheid culture in South Africa. So I'm hoping that the attention brought to the cultural struggle going on and now the attempt to build up a new culture, that we will benefit from the fact that I've got this prize, that there will be a spillover of interest and support.
Ms. Gordimer is the first woman to win the Literature Prize in 25 years. The prize is worth about $1 million, but Ms. Gordimer said she had had no time to think about what she'd do with the money.
Yugoslavia's Serbian Republic made a grab for power in the fractious nation today. It declared that it and 3 allied regions were assuming control of the federal parliament, effectively taking over the country. The political moves came as the Serb-dominated federal army pressed its military offensive against the breakaway Republic of Croatia. Heavy fighting continued around the Adriatic port of Dubrovnik and other key cities. Germany celebrated the first anniversary of its reunification today. German leaders used the celebrations in Berlin and other cities to call for patience in solving economic problems of transforming the former communist East Germany to a capitalist society. They also denounced a recent upsurge of violence aimed at immigrants and other foreigners. In the latest incident, 2 Lebanese girls were seriously burned in an attack on a refugee's home in Düsseldorf early today.
That's it for our summary of the day's news. Just ahead on the NewsHour, Robert Gates rebuts his critics. Reaction from 2 senators who will vote on his confirmation, Chafee and DeConcini, and some thoughts from the newest Nobel Prize winner for literature. We devote most of the program tonight to Robert Gates' effort to save his nomination as Central Intelligence Director. The focus of the Senate Intelligence Committee confirmation hearings have shifted from Gates' knowledge of the Iran-Contra deal to his actions as Deputy Director of the CIA. The committee has taken testimony and engaged in sharp exchanges with CIA analysts who had criticized Gates for politicizing intelligence. Today, Gates was given his chance to respond. Correspondent Roger Mudd reports.
The Robert Gates who appeared before the committee today was not the same Robert Gates who 2.5 weeks ago repeatedly acknowledged his mistakes and what he called his misjudgments. This time, his nomination was hanging in the balance, and this time it was his critics who Gates said had committed the mistakes and the misjudgments.
I've watched and listened and read with some dismay, as well as some pain and anger during recent days, the discussion here of slanting intelligence. I am saddened that these proceedings, except by happenstance, have not shined a brighter and deserving light on the many hundreds of extraordinarily capable, talented analysts who work so hard day in and day out in providing first-rate and absolutely honest intelligence to our government. It is also discouraging to see that the old battles, the old problems, the strong feelings about management's role in the analytic process, and worry about politicization have not diminished in intensity, even in the years since I left the agency. I believe there are several causes for this perception of politicization. It's usually greater, for example, whenever people up the line have strong views on substance, and I must say in the history of CIA that happens more often than not. When major changes in draft analysis come out of a review process, it is understandable that analysts would be more inclined to blame them on an external source such as political pressure than on weaknesses in their own analysis or exposition. No analyst who considers himself or herself to be the best informed person on a subject likes to be challenged. Analysts like to write on subjects they like in the ways they like. And to be told that your specific subject or the way you present it is irrelevant to policymakers or is not persuasive is hard to swallow. It was for me as an analyst, and it continues to be for analysts. Most analysts do well in the give and take, but some do not, and some see in this process political pressure, and that's why we're here today.
Gates equated the criticism of him with the unhappiness caused by a sweeping reorganization of the CIA in 1981.
For the first time in their careers, the analysts found themselves working for people that they often felt did not understand their own analysis or particular skill. In short, there was predictable, great disruption and a lot of unhappiness on the part of a lot of analysts who found their familiar worlds and surroundings turned upside down. I was appointed to change things, to improve quality, productivity, and relevance, to make analysis more rigorous and intellectually tougher, to encourage alternative views, to rely less on assertion and to make more use of evidence, and to be more open about the level of confidence in our sources and in our judgments. After much discussion, Admiral Inman and I agreed that I should announce all of these changes we intended at one time.
3 days after Gates took over as Deputy Director of Intelligence, he told the CIA's analysts what he thought of their work.
I addressed the problems as follows, and I quote from January 1982. I am obliged to tell you that from the standpoint of many of those for whom you write, our work has long been inadequate and still is not often held in high esteem. Obviously, CIA's analysts are capable of and do turn out high-quality work. But we also turn out work that is irrelevant, uninteresting, too late to be of value, too narrow, too unimaginative, and too often just flat wrong. I intend to ensure that the primary focus of you and your managers is kept on the single purpose for our existence: produce the best quality intelligence available anywhere. That is my only goal. I expect analysts to know their subject, past, present, and future, to know the intelligence sources from which they derive information and how to use and task those sources properly, to know what outside experts are thinking about their subject, to master the tools of analysis, including, for example, and where appropriate, language skills and computer skills, and to be aware of the priorities of our policymakers. And I expect analysts to write accurately and cogently. The steps I have outlined above are intended to direct all of our energies to that purpose. Many analysts at the time were challenged by the speech and the program. Others were offended, resented the obvious intent to diminish their autonomy by involving directorate managers at all levels in the substance and quality of the product, resisted further training or education, and greatly disliked the idea of accountability.
It was that speech, Gates claimed, that lost him friends. And with that explanation for the motives of his critics, Gates then embarked on a point-by-point refutation of his critics.
I am alleged to have believed the Kremlin was behind the attempted assassination of the Pope in 1981, to have ordered study with no look at evidence of Soviet non-involvement, to have rewritten personally the key judgments and summary, removing all references to inconsistencies and anomalies, to have dropped a scope note advising that the paper made no counter-arguments against Soviet complicity, and to have written a covering transmittal note unknown to the authors, saying that the Soviets were directly involved in portraying my views as CIA consensus. Now the facts. According to Mr. Lance Haas, the project manager, Kay Oliver, who was one of the drafters, and others, I told Haas that Casey was convinced of Soviet involvement in the assassination attempt, but that I was agnostic, and I expected him to be agnostic also. And that was the view I took before this committee when I testified here in February of 1983. Mr. Haas acknowledges that he killed the scope note as no longer relevant, and also that he wrote the transmittal letter, a letter which incidentally did not state unambiguously or any other way that the Soviets were directly involved. Indeed, the letter specifically says that questions remain and probably always will. Several participants recall that I was the one who urged adding the section of the paper pointing out the inconsistencies, weaknesses, anomalies, and gaps in the case for Soviet involvement, and that I was worried about the need for greater balance. The same participants recall no orders from me or anyone on the 7th floor to build a case against the Soviets. Rather, the suggestion in light of new reporting was simply to look at the new evidence with a focus on the Bulgarian connection. I did not rewrite the key judgments. Based on the evidence, the allegations that I drove this paper to its conclusions and then knowingly misrepresented it to policymakers are false. It is alleged that I allowed a Directorate of Operations officer involved in the Iran initiative to provide his own reports to the NSC and then to submit his own analysis of these reports to the President's daily brief, thereby making U.S. policymakers, including the President, recipients of CIA disinformation. In fact, the DO officer in question states that he briefed the NSC on only one occasion, and he briefed the NSC principals on the November 25th, 1986, at Mr. Casey's behest. He adds that he never got from me, nor was given by me, permission to disseminate anything. Further, he does not ever recall producing any information for dissemination acquired from the Iranians in connection with the Iranian initiative. A search of all presidential daily briefs in 1985 and 1986 has turned up no such article by this officer. Moreover, he does not remember ever writing anything for the PDB. This allegation that I allowed a president to get CIA disinformation is a particularly reckless and pernicious charge and is refuted by the man supposedly involved.
Point 17 involved the charge by former CIA analyst Mel Goodman that Gates had fired him because he was soft on the Soviet threat.
It is alleged that I ordered the senior intelligence officer for Soviet foreign policy to be removed from the Office of Soviet Analysis. In fact, the director of that office has written that I did not order the removal of anyone, although I did express dissatisfaction with the product of the Third World Activities Division and its, quote, thumb-in-your-eye, unquote, product style. Mr. McCacken then added, and I quote, I, Mr. McCacken, had found the division as a whole seemed to see each effort to address competing views as being driven by political motives, and therefore when they did address competing alternatives, it was done with what tended to be a back-of-the-hand approach. The division tended to see themselves in a holy war with the administration. I, McCacken, made the decision to move the division chief, unquote. And I would add that the officer was not removed from the office, but from a managerial position. He retained his senior grade, super grade, to which I promoted him, and became the office's senior analyst on foreign policy, where he continued to review the office's assessments on foreign policy and very successfully supervised preparation of a number of papers for President Reagan's first meeting with Gorbachev in Geneva in 1985. Finally, it is alleged that Casey and I created an agency view of the USSR that ignored Soviet vulnerabilities and weaknesses and failed to recognize the pluralistic political culture that Gorbachev developed in a relatively short period of time. In fact, the documentary record speaks for itself. I said on the 16th of October, 1986, I continue to worry that we are not being creative enough in the way we are analyzing internal Soviet developments. It seems to me we are looking at Soviet domestic and economic issues in terms of relatively straight-line projections based on the methodologies and data sources that have dominated our analysis in the past, without opening new lines of inquiry, asking new questions, and exploiting previously underutilized sources. From talking with Soviet defectors and émigrés and people who are in touch with middle-level Soviet officials in one way or another, I sense that there is a great deal more turbulence and unhappiness in the Soviet Union than we are conveying in anything we have written. I went on. To what degree, if at all, have we failed to give adequate attention to what Gorbachev actually has done? While we have talked about tinkering with the system, has he actually done a great deal more than that and set in motion even more to create the possibility of qualitative change in the Soviet system over a several-year period? We seem to be focusing on changes in the party and the government. What about the economy? Are we missing some significant changes underway? I am concerned that we are so caught up in the day-to-day tactical and discrete changes he is making and measuring them against some larger objective called, quote, reform, unquote, that we may not be pulling together all of the strands in such a way as to identify the cumulative scope of what he is up to. In sum, I am worried that there are a lot of questions that one hears from Soviet analysts and in discussions with various people that we are not doing any publishing on. I am concerned that we are in a rut and may not be recognizing significant change in the Soviet Union even as it is taking place. I'm not arguing that all these things are true. I just don't see the issues being addressed in our publications. Everything seems too pat. Mr. Chairman, in closing, let me just say I've been gratified by the strong support in front of this committee by Admiral Inman and John McMahon, two of our country's most senior and esteemed intelligence professionals. Most important, President Bush, with whom I have worked so closely during these revolutionary times, has spoken publicly and repeatedly of his confidence in my integrity and my ability to lead the CIA and the intelligence community. This uncommon relationship between us and his expectations, having himself been director, offer a unique opportunity to remake American intelligence and to do so while preserving and promoting the integrity of the intelligence process and a strong and positive relationship with the Congress. Thank you.
When Gates finished his prepared testimony, the Republicans were delighted. Gates had been, they thought, sincere, saddened by but forgiving of his critics, precise in his answers, vehement in his denials. But the Democrats were not so sure. They would now have to rely on their questioning to make their case. The Democratic questioning began with John Glenn of Ohio, who confessed he was having trouble deciding whom to believe, Robert Gates or his critics like Mel Goodman.
This is direct quote of what Mr. Goodman stated under oath, and it refers to the 1985 intelligence assessment on the papal assassination issue as an example of the imposition of intelligence without evidence. Now, here's what he says with regard to that same assessment. So what did Bob Gates do? Bob Gates rewrote the key judgments. Bob Gates rewrote the summary. Bob Gates dropped a very interesting scope note that said, in trying to explain the methodology, that we only looked at the case for Soviet involvement. We didn't look at any on the evidence, and I might add very good evidence from very sensitive sources that would have explained the Soviets were not involved. He dropped that scope note. Can you go through and give your version of each one of those? Now, that was testimony under oath, Mr. Gates, and you're under oath now, so.
Yes, sir. I think part of the problem here, Senator Glenn, is something that some of the members of the committee have referred to at various points. I don't think anybody, any of the witnesses, are intentionally misleading this committee. What I think you have here is the contrast between those with first-hand experience, those who were directly involved in the events, and those who are hearing secondhand about what happened. And I think the difference here is that Mr. Goodman was not directly involved, and the two analysts who have submitted sworn statements to this committee were in fact those who were in charge of the project and actually did these things. I think that's the difference.
Well, okay, let me go through this, and I don't have a whole lot of time remaining now, but did you rewrite the key judgments?
No, sir, and these analysts say that I did not.
Did you rewrite the summary?
No, sir.
Did you drop a very interesting scope note that indicated that there were other sensitive sources that would explain the Soviets were not involved?
Not according to these analysts, Senator.
Well, I'm asking you, though. I don't want the analyst's opinion. I want
Senator,
yours if you have.
Let me say something that applies to a lot of other things before this committee. What I've given you this morning, I certainly didn't remember. I put that together over the weekend, over the last few days, from documents, from testimony from others, from what others have said before this committee, from the documentary evidence available at the agency, and from asking questions out at the agency. As I indicated in my statement, I reviewed something like 2,500 papers and estimates. And I have to admit to you that when I left CIA in 1989, I had no reason to try and stay on top of all these things, and I probably never was on top of them in terms of remembering them. And so to ask me what I specifically recall saying or doing about a specific paper without my being able to go back and look at it, or my being able to talk to others who were more directly involved, gives me a real problem. And it's not because I have selective amnesia, it's that I did a major data dump when I left CIA. There was no reason to keep all that information in my mind. I never expected to go back to CIA, and that was all the past. So that's why I have to rely on the testimony of others.
Then Democratic Chairman David Boren returned to the Iran-Contra affair and Gates's contention that he did not know Colonel Oliver North was running the operation.
My question is this. On October the 9th, you had this meeting with Colonel North, in which Colonel North was present. I believe Mr. Casey was there. And the Hassenfuss plane had been shot down. And Colonel North, you said by your own recollection that you turned to Colonel North and you asked Colonel North, is the CIA clean in this operation? You asked him, in essence, to certify that the agency was clean in this matter. Now, unless you really thought that Mr. North was in some way involved in running this operation, that he had a lot more knowledge of it other than just encouraging the fundraising and encouraging their efforts as a general way, why would you ask a question? Why would you think he could tell you whether or not the CIA was clean unless you thought that he had some role in the operations, or unless you had some suspicion that he was involved in the operation?
I didn't, as I recall, the memo that I did afterward, I didn't just say, is CIA clean? I rather said, did he have any reason to believe or any indication that CIA in any way, indirectly or anything else, had any connection with this thing? And it was purely in connection with knowing that he was in touch with the private benefactors. The idea that he was quarterbacking this thing or running it, frankly, based on my own experience with the NSC staff, just never even occurred to me, quite honestly, that he was at the hub of this entire operation.
I don't want to belabor this point, but how could you have confidence in any certification he could give you that the CIA was clean and not involved unless you thought he had some knowledge of the operations?
Well, again, just because he was involved, knew about was in touch with the private benefactors. This was my first flap as DDCI on anything having to do with covert action. I was trying to make sure before the director and I came up here to talk to the chairman and vice chairman of the two intelligence committees that I'd covered what bases I knew. I'd touched the important base, which was our own Directorate of Operations, and I saw another opportunity knowing that the NSC was in touch with these people, to touch that base as well. I didn't see him as a major source for this thing or as a major certifier, if you will. It was just another base to touch as far as I was concerned.
The usual nonpartisan atmosphere of the Intelligence Committee seemed to evaporate as the questioning continued. Democrat Dennis DeConcini of Arizona, who now believes Gates' nomination is in jeopardy, found himself the victim of a Republican timekeeper.
Let me focus you on another one in my time.
Senator, your
yeah,
time's up, and
Mr. Chairman, I have
the senator from
had two
Arizona.
times now where I've been restricted to 15 minutes, and they've both been when you were acting chairman.
Well, I'm sorry that you feel that way, Senator.
Well, I do feel that
incorrect.
way, and I feel it's unfair, and I will gladly once again adhere to the vice chairman's cutting this senator off.
I appreciate that. I did not cut the senator from Arizona off. I simply asked the senator from Arizona to try and abide by the time. I do not keep the time, as the senator from Arizona knows. It's kept by an independent, nonpartisan timekeeper in the back.
Once again, it was the committee's two antagonists, Republican Rudman of New Hampshire and Democrat Metzenbaum of Ohio, who generated the sparks.
But I want to just say that when I went back to my office last night, my staff, who I'm very close to, said to me, Senator, we've never seen you so angry. We've seen you through Iran-Contra. We've seen you through contentious hearings. You were truly angry yesterday. And the press reflected that this morning. And you were all right. It's true this isn't a murder trial, as some suggested yesterday. But this committee did witness yesterday, as far as I'm concerned, an attempted assassination. The assassination of this man's character. Mr. Chairman, it may come as a surprise to some in this room, but I do not believe that opponents to a nomination need to meet the beyond the reasonable doubt standard of a criminal law trial to justify their opposition. But to level the most serious charge of professional misconduct at Robert Gates requires some evidence, some reasoned analysis. To make such a charge without any supporting evidence, to manufacture facts, and I believe some were manufactured, to inaccurately quote individuals and documents, and to cite anonymous hearsay is, and I choose my words carefully, McCarthyism pure and simple.
I've been through a lot of confirmation hearings, and I'm frank to say that I don't know when I've ever heard so many people who were willing to come forward under most embarrassing circumstances to speak out against a nominee. Oh, we heard many with respect to Clarence Thomas, but those were professionals. Those are people who had organizational positions. Every single person who has been a witness in this hearing, every person has been talked about, whether it's Polgar, Ford, Glaubman, all of them. I don't know them. Never met them before. Never saw these documents until they were just put in the record. And it is true, as Senator Rudman says, it's a very heavy responsibility that we bear as far as the confirmation process is concerned, as far as your reputation is concerned. But I think we bear a far stronger responsibility than that. I think our responsibility is the people of this country. What will the people of America think if we confirm for this position a man against whom so many have been willing to come forth and challenge and question the integrity and question the reliability? What are we doing to the CIA? What will people think of the CIA in the future? Will it help to reestablish its reputation, or will it hurt in establishing its reputation? Will there be negatives, or will there be positives that come out of it? I don't really believe anymore that the question only is, should Robert Gates be confirmed or shouldn't he, based upon the record? I think that's a very, very difficult question. You can vote yes, you might get 51 votes, you might get 65 or 82. But I say that no matter how you slice it, this entire matter, the fact so many have come forward with so many reservations and so many concerns, I believe has put the image of the CIA in question, and I'm not sure that we help that image by confirming you for this position.
Gates must return again tomorrow and must wait until October 18th for the committee vote.
We get more on the Gates hearings from two members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, John Chafee, a Republican from Rhode Island, and Democrat Dennis DeConcini of Arizona. They join us from the Senate gallery. Senator DeConcini, did Robert Gates remove your doubts today?
No, he didn't. He gave some honest answers, I'm sure, but I was not impressed at all. My feeling was that Mr. Gates kind of laid it to us that if you're disloyal to Mr. Gates, meaning the witnesses that came forward that I felt didn't have any axe to grind in his opposition, that then you were, or if you disagreed with Mr. Gates, then you were disloyal to the CIA. I don't think that's the right approach. I think Mr. Gates has to do what he did the first day he was up and the second day he was up and be candid and totally frank with the committee. I didn't get that feeling today from him.
Whom do you believe now, Gates or his critics?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, I want to give the man a full opportunity, and I haven't made up my mind. I went into the hearing with the presumption to confirm him, and after his testimony regarding the Iran-Contra, I was satisfied that he was very candid and frank with us, but the allegations that have been brought forward are indeed very serious. And as much as some of my Republican friends want to say that they're just hearsay and nonsense and that they don't substantiate anything, it just isn't true. There are some real fundamental allegations there, and we have to decide, in my judgment, all of us, whether or not they are enough to tip the scale to vote against him.
Senator
Chafee, I'm sorry. I haven't made up my mind.
Senator Chafee, as a Gates supporter who told us several weeks ago that he wasn't in any trouble because no one in the history of the American government, you said, had been so scrutinized as Bob Gates, have these fresh allegations given you any doubts?
Well, I came away, frankly, disturbed and angered, frankly, at the presentation of the witnesses yesterday, because time after time they'd say in their personal dealings with Mr. Gates, they'd found him honorable, straight arrow, playing it right up the middle, not influencing one way or the other. However, they'd heard from others, and then they'd go on. Now, it's one thing for Senator DeConcini to dismiss these statements as hearsay, but not only were they hearsay in many instances, in other instances they are flatly rebutted. For example, we found Mr. Goodman making certain charges, and right at the same table was his superior, Mr. McEachen, who said that absolutely was not so, and we've had Mr. McEachen's statements corroborated by additional evidence we've received from Ms. Oliver and others.
So you have no doubts?
It seems to me that Mr. Gates did a superb job today, because what he did, he rebutted this hearsay evidence with documentary facts. In other words, he came in with his own comments from the time, the notes that he'd written on top of the analyst report, indicating his approach. So the idea that this is just eeny, meeny, miny, mo, one way or the other, toss it up, is just not so. Well, we have facts on one side, we have hearsay charges on the other that I think is an improper way to proceed.
Now, I think the credibility gap is even widened, because all of a sudden Mr. Gates has all this recollection now, when the first few days before us he was very frank and he said, I don't remember. And now he all of a sudden can itemize every little thing that he wrote back. Now, some of this was not hearsay. We had testimony yesterday from Ms. Gladman that said that they got a handwritten note, 2 handwritten notes. I intend to ask him about that. Maybe he can explain that away. I'm willing to give him that benefit and that opportunity to do it. This is not all hearsay. And I think my friend from Rhode Island knows it isn't hearsay. There's serious allegations here, and that's why we're debating this tonight, and that's why it isn't a slam dunk, because there's serious allegations that Mr. Gates has to overcome before he gets some other votes.
One serious allegation that's come up that's been corroborated by any facts. What Mr. Gates did was not refresh his memory. He went back and got each of the documentary facts to rebut these allegations that were made.
He could not rebut the allegations by Mrs. Gladman.
That's what is important. Ms. Gladman yesterday gave a whole series of comments that she'd heard. And indeed, some of her statements dealt with after Mr. Gates had left the agency.
But not only did that she had heard that she had received from him his own handwriting.
Senator Chafee, on the point, did you hear the excerpts we just ran?
I did.
Did you hear the point that Senator Metzenbaum just made at the end, that whether Gates is telling the truth or not, and whatever his competence, can he run the CIA when so many of its officers obviously are willing to come forward and testify against him, and some of them clearly despise him for what they believe to have been his politicization of the intelligence.
Well, I think that's a little bit of an editorial comment when you say so many.
Well,
when you've got an agency with several thousand
I'm quoting Senator Metzenbaum.
And several thousand employees, and you have some come forward. Mr. Gates was, in many instances, an abrasive individual, and the question is, he took positions. Now, do we want somebody running the CIA that's a namby-pamby, that is only out to preserve peace, not rock the boat at all? If that's what we want, then we shouldn't have Mr. Gates.
I think
but if we want a leader, somebody who's going to take charge, particularly in these turbulent times where there's going to be a reduction in the budget, all kinds of difficulties, then go with Mr. Gates.
I think we want someone like Mr. Webster, who had the credibility, not only with the president who let him stay in there, and not only with the Congress that had the oversight, but with the American public. And he didn't have 18 people, as Hal Ford, a very respected analyst, 18, he said, people called him voluntarily who are still working there. And 16 of them were opposed to Gates because he had not been honest when he was there. That's what he said to us yesterday.
We're going to be
not
in
just
trouble in this country if the President of the United States will not nominate anybody for office who might be opposed. We're going to come down to a whole series of ciphers. Is Mr. Gates sometimes abrasive? Is he sometimes in contention? Yes, indeed. And if you can read, if you followed the testimony today, you saw the notes that he wrote to on the analyst reports. 2,500 of those analyses he read, he wrote reports on, it was amazing to me to listen to the reports that he wrote. He not only gave criticism, but he was specific. He said, this is what you should look into. And I might say, I've been around this town, as has Senator DeConcini, if somebody agrees with you, they're a statesman. If somebody disagrees with you, they are a politician. They're doing it for political purposes.
Senator Rudman referred in that excerpt to his own anger, which was obvious yesterday. Senator DeConcini, what does this partisanship do to the CIA and to congressional confidence in the future of the agency if Gates is confirmed, and he himself referred to his very close relationship with the president? Is this going to make the CIA more of the president's agency that Congress won't, that at least Democrats in the Congress won't have confidence in?
Well, I think it depends on whether or not Mr. Gates can convince some of us that he did not politicize as a policy and that he was indeed his own man. He hasn't carried that burden for this senator now. Now, you can get as mad as you want to, as my good friend from New Hampshire, Senator Rudman, yesterday, and you can get as partisan as you want to, and all that does is hurt your nominee. We've seen that before here, and I think John Chafee will agree. The partisanism isn't going to help Mr. Gates, isn't going to help the president, even if he wins, and it's not going to help the CIA. All we want to know is the facts here. I'm just surprised that some of the Republicans aren't asking some questions, because these are not just off-the-cuff remarks. These are not people that have axes to grind against Mr. Gates. These are people with very respected opinions and very respected careers who have come forward. These are not some kind of kooks.
Senator Chafee, why are you Republicans so hot on this? I mean, why is Senator what's the motive for Senator Rudman's anger and yours?
Well, I just get deeply disturbed when I see witnesses come in who will say, oh, everything he's done has been right as far as I'm concerned. However, and I worked closely with him for 9 months or 10 months or 2 years or whatever it was. However, I since have talked to several people who said they were told that he did not do this or that. And to me, that comes, I think the word character assassination is a valid one. If they know of personal experience that they've had with the nominee where he's politicized things, let's hear it. But let's not have it hiding behind some other person coming and reporting to them, whereas they themselves say, and this is Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford said, right down the straight arrow he was when I dealt with him.
Well, let me ask you another question, since you don't agree on that. Senator Chafee, since Robert Gates was such a noted cold warrior, does he have the breadth of vision, apart from personality, does he have the breadth of vision and the empathy, or whatever it is, to run the CIA in the new post-Cold War world?
Well, I think he does, and indeed, as you know, he wasn't always a cold warrior. I mean, that's a title that has been some people have given him, but today he read off a note that he had attached to an analyst report
about an analysis that dealing with the Soviet Union way back in 1987.
Yes, we heard it.
And you heard that.
Yeah.
You've heard his views on, perhaps you didn't, on the Soviet pipeline. He said they're going to build it. Don't try to resist it. We heard his views on analyses in connection with the Soviets using chemical weapons. He said they're not going to use it. He came forward with this right in the middle of the big congressional debate over binary weapons. So he's a man. He's a man with some backbone.
This is the same guy that thought Gorbachev was going to fall and that had not read at all the political changes and reforms that were going on in the Soviet Union. And that's okay. I don't know if that's a reason to deny him, but we're trying to sell this man, or it's trying to be sold here that he foresaw all of this. He didn't foresee it at all, and he made a lot of mistakes because the allegations still stand, and they haven't been knocked down for this senator because he was trying to manipulate it and not tell the policymakers who were relying on the intelligence everything.
Well,
that's all you have to do. You have to tell them. You have to tell them both sides.
There's no evidence whatsoever for what Senator Deacon
Yes, there is.
We have 30 seconds.
For people to see, and all you had to do was be there yesterday. Maybe you missed those hearings where those witnesses
We have
laid
30
it out.
seconds, gentlemen. I just what can you both foresee now? When we did this with you, Senator Chafee, and Senator Metzenbaum a few weeks ago, you both said, oh, he'll be confirmed. Senator Chafee, will he be confirmed?
I believe he's going to be confirmed for a variety of reasons. One is the integrity of the man. Two, he's rebutted these charges against him. He has the confidence of the president, and I believe he's going to be confirmed.
Senator DeConcini, is he going to be confirmed?
He may be confirmed if he can satisfy at least this senator and a few other Democrats on the side that he has rebutted these accusations that are serious accusations. He did not do it today by any means. Maybe he will through the questions. That's what the process is all about.
Thank you both, Senator DeConcini, Senator Chafee. Thank you.
Finally, a few minutes with Nadine Gordimer, the winner of this year's Nobel Prize for Literature. She's the first woman in 25 years to receive that honor. The white South African novelist is a member of the African National Congress, and some of her works had been banned in South Africa because of their anti-apartheid themes. The Royal Swedish Academy, in announcing the award, said Gordimer's works have been of very great benefit to humanity. The Academy added, she writes with intense immediacy about the extremely complicated personal and social relationships in her environment. Charlene Hunter-Gault discussed those relationships with Nadine Gordimer in a 1987 interview. Here's an excerpt.
You seem to be speaking out more publicly than in the past. What's motivating that?
Living there, realizing that one has a responsibility as a human being, as a white African. It's no good just saying, I believe that there's going to be a post-apartheid South Africa, that there's going to be justice there. Nothing's going to be perfect, but I believe in the future of South Africa. You've got to put your life on the line and show that you're in the struggle.
Is it harder to speak out than it is to write and get your views out that way?
Well, I don't consider that in my writing I get my views out. I separate my responsibility as a writer, my responsibility to my craft, from my responsibilities as a human being, as a white living in South Africa. I think there's a special responsibility about being a white in South Africa, as there are special responsibilities about being a black. Nobody, I think, can just go on living there without taking sides, yes.
Given everything that's going on in South Africa, what is the environment like for an artist, a creator? Is it good? Is it bad?
It's so difficult to say, because if you look back into the past or the present, you think of what has happened in Latin America, the incredible turmoil. But the most interesting writing, new writing, coming from the Americas, has come from these very places. Sometimes the writers have been in exile, sometimes they've been at home, sometimes they've gone back when the regime has changed. But there's been a great spurt of creative energy there. The same might be true of South Africa. And if you look back into the past, you think of the great novels of Russia in the 19th century, late 19th century. I mean, Dostoevsky was always writing one sentence ahead of the censors, of the Tsar's censors. But I think if there is any advantage to be gained for the writer, it's because people are living extraordinary lives. They're living very fully. It's almost impossible, certainly among blacks. Very few people are living in a kind of rut, just paying off the rent on the price of the house, or paying off the TV set or a new set of furniture or whatever. Their lives have been jostled about and forced into all sorts of strange contortions by events.
And Nadine Gordimer?
Well, mine too, of course. To a certain extent, I can't compare my experience with that of blacks living in the townships.
But to your creative energy, this does what?
Well, with me, and now I'm speaking only for myself, the necessity to do other things, not to concentrate myself entirely on my own work, I find a strain. But as I've said before, I feel I must do it.
Again, the main stories of this Thursday, CIA Director nominee Robert Gates denied accusations that he had slanted intelligence reports to conform with his political views. The Organization of American States agreed to send a high-level delegation to Haiti in an attempt to restore the government following Monday's military coup. And Arkansas Democratic Governor Bill Clinton entered the 1992 race for president. Good night, Robin.
Good night, Judy. That's the News Hour for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night with our regular Friday political analysts, Gergen and Shields. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night.
Funding for the News Hour has been provided by PepsiCo. Every day we enjoy people being cold to us, cutting us up, getting fresh with us, tearing into us, and calling us chicken.